Welcome back to the basement. I'm Steve Lewis. Today we begin winding up our deep dive into the year 1969 with a look at the months of October, November, and December. Once again, we'll break it into two parts. This time we'll talk about music, movies, and television. Next time we'll carry on with news, what the Beach Boys were up to, and a little bit more about music. Let's get started right away with a look at the first album chart of the quarter, October 4th, 1969. At number 1 was Green River by Creedence Clearwater Revival in the first of 4 weeks in the number 1 spot. At number 2 was Johnny Cash at San Quentin. This had been number 1 for 4 weeks beginning August 26th. At number 3 was the Blind Faith album. This had been number 1 for the prior 2 weeks. At number 4 was Through the Past Darkly, Big Hits Volume 2 by the Rolling Stones. It'll peak at number 2 for 2 weeks beginning October 11th. Blood, Sweat, and Tears album had been in the top 10 at the beginning of the prior 2 quarters. It was now at number 5. Best of Cream was at number 6. It had peaked at number 3 on September 13th. At number 7 was Smash Hits by the Jimi Hendrix Experience. As mentioned in an earlier episode, this had gone to number 6 for 2 weeks beginning September 6th. At number 8 was Inagata Davida by Iron Butterfly. This had first entered the top 10 1 year earlier. At number 9 was The Soft Parade by The Doors. This had gone to number 6 for 2 weeks beginning August 23rd. And still hanging in the top 10 was the original cast album for Hair, which had been at number 1 when the third quarter began. Turning to top 10 singles as the fourth quarter began, in the third of 4 weeks at number 1 was Sugar Sugar by the animated Saturday morning cartoon group The Archies. Jeannie by Oliver was in the first of 2 weeks at its number 2 peak. Bobby Sherman, the teen idol star of TV's Here Come the Brides, was having his first hit single with Little Woman. It was in the first of 2 weeks at its number 3 peak. Easy to Be Hard by Three Dog Night was in the second of 2 weeks at its number 4 peak. I Can't Get Next to You by The Temptations was at number 5. It'll reach number 1 for 2 weeks beginning October 18th. Honky Tonk Women by the Rolling Stones had been number 1 for 4 weeks beginning August 23rd and was still hanging in at number 6. Green River by Creedence Clearwater Revival was at number 7. It had been at its number 2 peak a week earlier. At number 8 was Everybody's Talkin', a song by Fred Neil performed by Harry Nilsson and featured in the film Midnight Cowboy. It had just entered the top 10. It'll peak at number 6 next week, October 11th. Hot Fun in the Summertime by Sly and the Family Stone was at number 9. It'll peak at number 5 on October 11th. Oh, What a Night by the Dells was at number 10. Among the many trends in 1969 was a small doo-wop revival, which could possibly be seen as a kind of early precursor to the 50s nostalgia craze of the early 70s. It was in the second of its 3 weeks at number 10. Top 10 singles that will come and go in the fourth quarter include This Girl Is a Woman Now by Gary Puckett and the Union Gap, which will go to number 9 on October 11th. That's the Way Love Is by Marvin Gaye will go to number 7 on October 18th. Tracy by the Cufflinks will be number 9 for 2 weeks beginning October 25th. I'm Gonna Make You Mine by Lou Christie will go to number 10 on October 25th. Suspicious Minds by Elvis Presley will go to number 1 on November 1st. It's his first number 1 hit since Good Luck Charm back in April 1962, and though he still has a lot of hits ahead of him, as it will transpire, this will be his last time in the number 1 spot. Baby It's You by Smith will be number 5 for 3 weeks beginning November 1st. Wedding Bell Blues, written by Laura Nyro and performed by the Fifth Dimension, will be number 1 for 3 weeks beginning November 8th. Smile a Little Smile for Me by The Flying Machine will go to number 5 on November 22nd. And When I Die by Blood, Sweat, and Tears, another hit written by Laura Nyro, will go to number 2 on November 29th. Eli's Comin' by Three Dog Night, also written by Laura Nyro, will go to number 10 for 2 weeks beginning November 29th. Yester Me, Yester You, Yesterday by Stevie Wonder, a really good track with a silly title, will go to number 7 for 2 weeks beginning December 13th. And Backfield in Motion by Mel and Tim will hit number 10 on December 13th. Among notable new album releases in the last 3 months of the year, on October 14th came From Memphis to Vegas, From Vegas to Memphis by Elvis Presley. It was a double album featuring one live album recorded in Las Vegas and one studio album recorded in Memphis. It'll reach number 12 on December 27th. One day later, on the 15th of October, came Three Dog Night Was Captured Live at the Forum. Released on October 22nd was Led Zeppelin II. Also released in October was Tom Jones Live in Las Vegas, and the self-titled first album from Here Come the Bride star and burgeoning teen idol Bobby Sherman. It'll reach number 11 early in 1970. Released on November 2nd was Volunteers by Jefferson Airplane. This will go to number 13 for 2 weeks beginning December 13th. And also on November 2nd, Creedence Clearwater Revival were already back with another album, Willie and the Poor Boys. Also released in November was Joe Cocker, which will go to number 11 in January 1970, and Engelbert Humperdinck's self-titled album, which will go to number 5 on February 14th, 1970. On November 21st comes To Our Children's Children's Children by the Moody Blues. It'll go to number 14 early in the new year. On December 5th, the day before the final show of the Rolling Stones U.S. tour, which will be a free show at Altamont Speedway in California, their new album, Let It Bleed, is finally released. On December 12th, Live Peace in Toronto by the Plastic Ono Band is released. It'll spend 2 weeks at number 10, beginning February 7th, 1970. And on December 18th came Diana Ross Presents the Jackson 5. Like most debut albums, this will take a while to catch on. It'll reach number 5 on April 25th, 1970. Also released in December was Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head by B.J. Thomas. The title track, written by Burt Bacharach and Hal David, is of course featured in the new hit film Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid in a scene that the album cover references visually. The album will hit number 12 early in 1970. And on December 29th came the debut album from Grand Funk Railroad, simply titled Grand Funk. This will eventually go to number 11 in 1970. On November 7th, the Rolling Stones began their first U.S. concert tour in 3 years. A lot has changed since 1966. The venues are larger, the sound system's better, and the audience is no longer full of screaming girls, but rather enthusiastic fans who have come to hear the music. On Sunday, November 23rd, the Stones appear on The Ed Sullivan Show, performing Give Me Shelter and Love in Vain from their new album, along with their recent hit single, Honky Tonk Women. On December 6th, the Altamont Speedway free concert takes place in Livermore, California, an all-star event that's envisioned as sort of a Woodstock West. The event is to be headlined by the Rolling Stones. In absolute contrast to the Woodstock Festival, Altamont descends into drug-fueled tension with a chapter of the Hells Angels reportedly hired by the Stones to provide security, beating members of the crowd and even some of the musicians. During the Stones set, there's an altercation between audience member Meredith Hunter and a Hells Angel. During the fight, Hunter pulls a gun and is stabbed to death. For the counterculture, Altamont soon becomes a symbol of the decline of the Aquarian Age. Moving on, in new movie releases in the fourth quarter of the year, on October 15th came Paint Your Wagon. For a year in which man landed on the moon and people were looking forward to the coming 1970s, the Western genre was surprisingly active in 1969. There had already been such excellent, unique, and inventive Westerns as True Grit, The Wild Bunch, and Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Paint Your Wagon was certainly another unique one. It's a musical comedy based on Lerner and Lowe's 1951 Broadway musical. Improbably, they cast Western stars Lee Marvin and Clint Eastwood along with Gene Seberg in the lead roles. They both sing just about as well as you'd expect. Nevertheless, it'll be successful and number 1 the week of December 10th. Released on October 17th was The Secret of Santa Vittoria, a comedy drama starring Anthony Quinn as a man helping his Italian village hide over 1 million bottles of wine from the Germans during World War II. It'll be number 1 at the box office the week of February 4th, 1970. On October 22nd comes The Sterile Cuckoo, a romantic comedy starring Liza Minnelli. Released on November 10th was Change of Habit, the 31st and final film in which Elvis had an acting role. After this, his film appearances will be concert films and documentaries. Uncharacteristically, it was a lightweight drama with socially relevant overtones. In his final film, he plays a doctor working at a free clinic in the inner city. Former Dick Van Dyke Show co-star Mary Tyler Moore plays a nun sent to assist him. Despite some modest ambitions, the general public, most of Elvis's fans, and seemingly Elvis himself had long ago lost interest in his movies, and this one sinks without more than a ripple at the box office. On December 4th came A Boy Named Charlie Brown, a big screen adaptation of Charles Schulz's Peanuts comic strip. It was well received by the critics and the public, going to number 1 the week of December 17th. Personally, I happened to see it recently, and while it has some nice moments, in particular I found Linus continuously whining about his lost blanket to be unsubtle, unfunny, and annoying. I think the characters are much more lovable in their Christmas and Halloween TV specials. On December 10th, we got They Shoot Horses, Don't They?, a critically acclaimed drama set around an abusive 1930s dance marathon, which seemed to serve as a metaphor for capitalist society. It stars Jane Fonda and Michael Sarrazin. Released on December 16th was Hello, Dolly, the hit big screen version of the hit 1964 musical starring Barbra Streisand and Walter Matthau. Also released on the 16th was Cactus Flower, a screwball comedy starring Laughlin's Goldie Hawn in her first major film role, for which she'll win an Oscar for Best Supporting Actress at the Academy Awards ceremony on April 7, 1970. It'll be number 1 at the box office for 2 weeks in March 1970. On December 18th, Bond was back in On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Scottish Sean Connery had left the Bond series to be replaced by Australian George Lazenby. Lazenby certainly looked the part, but didn't have the on-screen charisma and light touch for the role. Bond also married for the first and only time in a film, an act that ensured his wife, Tracy, played by a recently post-Avengers Diana Rigg, would not survive long. Still, it was James Bond, so it was a hit. It'll be number 1 for the last 2 weeks of 1969 and the first 2 weeks of 1970. One day later, on December 19th, came Topaz, Alfred Hitchcock's first film since Torn Curtain in 1966. Unlike most of his films since the 1940s, it doesn't feature any major stars. The cast is largely unknowns. In the film, Hitchcock experiments with using colors to reveal the plot, which he later admits didn't work. The reviews are largely negative. Notable on television in the last 3 months of the year, on Monday, November 10th, Sesame Street debuts on public television. It's a revolution in children's educational television in a lot of ways, not least because it's clever enough to be something parents can also enjoy watching. On Tuesday, December 2nd, after 4.5 seasons on the air, Jeannie marries Major Anthony Nelson on NBC's I Dream of Jeannie. The plot had played out all through the fall of 1969 with a 2-part engagement episode airing on September 30th and October 7th. Reportedly, pretty much the entire cast and crew strenuously objected, but NBC insists it will be a great ratings winner, which it is, considering the middling ratings the show usually draws. It also removes the one element that makes the series different from ABC's Bewitched. When the show is canceled at the end of the season, many of those involved believe that the wedding had wrecked the series. On the other hand, after 5 years, the concept is pretty played out. Just over 2 weeks later, on Wednesday, December 17th, another wedding and an even bigger ratings winner takes place on TV when Laugh-In guest sensation singer Tiny Tim marries Miss Vicki Budinger on NBC's Tonight Show. It's a religious ceremony, and Johnny Carson and his staff are careful to treat it respectfully. After the ceremony, the couple sit down for an interview with Carson. The episode is watched by an estimated 40 million people. Earlier that same evening over on CBS, you could have caught the return of Hee Haw. Having drawn good ratings as a summer replacement series, CBS brought it back to kick off its Wednesday night lineup. It'll run on CBS until July 13th, 1971, and then continue in syndication until 1992. Hee Haw takes the slot formerly occupied by the Glenn Campbell Good Time Hour, which moves to Sunday nights to replace the failed new variety hour, The Leslie Uggam Show. This was the same time slot that the canceled Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour had occupied when 1969 began. That'll do it for this time. Thanks for watching. As always, I look forward to your comments and feedback. Please join me next week when we wrap up 1969. There's much more to come in music. We'll also look at news and, of course, what our old friends the Beach Boys were up to. Till then, please hit like if you don't mind, subscribe if you haven't. Have a great week. Bye.